So developments within the SADC region now, and SADC leaders will once again host a summit in the next few weeks to address the challenges facing the Kingdom of Eswatini. The body intervened last year after unprecedented violent protests in June, which left scores of protesters dead and infrastructure destroyed or damaged. After another flare-up of violence in October, President Cyril Ramaphosa visited Eswatini in November to meet King Mswati III and announced afterwards that the king had agreed to launch a national political dialogue. Swazi human rights lawyer Thulani Maseko talks to us via Zoom now about their expectations and reservations ahead of this SADC meeting. So we don't have the details, Mr. Maseko, but it seems it will be a troika meeting that will be looking into the situation in Eswatini. And when I say that, I imagine that it is all about really getting this national political dialogue going, because it doesn't seem that it has moved much since it was announced by President Ramaphosa late last year. Are those your expectations that this troika might actually succeed in getting this dialogue on the move?
Good afternoon, Thulani. Thank you so very much for having us on the show. Yes, we are really hoping that this time around, the agenda would include an item on Swaziland. We very well remember that sometime early in the year, we advised that the king opted out of the meeting of the organ troika, where the issue would have been raised. So we're hoping that this time, given that SADC has produced what they call the draft framework, there'll be an agreement on how we take the process forward to a negotiation and dialogue in Swaziland.
Yeah, and that question of whether or not the king will be participating, we'll learn from the writing of Peter Fabricius on Daily Maverick that has now happened. Indications are the king will be participating. Is that a positive move? Is that something that at least affords the opportunity for these other regional leaders to be at least in the same room with the king to say this process actually does need to go forward?
We welcome the fact that either the king or the prime minister will attend the meeting. We're not sure exactly who between the two of them will attend the meeting. But we are encouraged by the fact that at least the government has agreed to be part of that meeting. And we do hope that as opposed to the king intending to convene a dialogue or some form of process that is not inclusive as we expect, we do hope that the leaders of the region will impress and prevail on the king that the only way that we can move forward together is when nobody is left out in the process. We don't want a situation where the king is the referee and player of the process. We have seen that in the past. We are saying this time around, we calling for a process that is all-inclusive, where SADC will play the role to facilitate the inclusive dialogue for the full of Swaziland.
And is that where the process is actually held up, Mr. Maseko, in that there's no agreement on the format? My recollection is that there's this talk about whether the dialogue should take the form of Sibaya, my understanding is that the opposition and pro-democracy campaigners are completely rejecting. Has that not shifted in the last few months? Does that remain the position that the king would prefer a traditional type of arrangement, Sibaya, where he's sort of speaking to his subjects, whereas the pro-democracy campaigners want a robust process where there'll be engagement, where there'll be give and take and the likes?
Absolutely, Thulani. I think though there's some kind of agreement around a process of dialogue, there's obviously disagreement on the nature and form that this dialogue should take. We in the Mass Democratic Movement are of the view that we need a process that is all-inclusive. We need a situation where all impediments to free and meaningful participation of the people through their organs, be they political parties or civil society, are allowed to engage with the process. We are calling for a situation where all the laws that are making it difficult for the people to prosecute are removed. Yet, on the other hand, the king seems to be very committed to force the people to submit to his Sibaya, forum, which we have made very clear that we're not going to accept that as a platform of negotiations, because over the years, for the last 49 years or so of the Tingunda regime, Sibaya in recent years has been used as a platform where the people in the world have been bluffed to believe that when people assemble there, they are free to express themselves. History has taught us that you may go there and express a view that is unpopular with the regime. The consequences that have followed people who have spoken against the king and monarchy and government at the Sibaya. We are therefore saying that although we can't stop the king from convening Sibaya, for him to announce and tell the nation committing to a process that is underwritten by SADC, we want him to come out and say the process will be underwritten, will be facilitated by an independent party in the name of SADC, not him and the government.
Yeah. Lastly, Mr. Maseko, while all of this is happening as we look forward to this Troika summit, what is the situation in Eswatini now as we speak? My understanding is that there's a bit of a focus on the role of the police, members of the police force in Eswatini, with the result that there's been some incidents involving police and Eswatini Dlamini being designated a terrorist of sorts.
Of course, Thulani, where the environment is not good. We have warned many times before that the continuation of a stalemate where government and the king are obviously deliberately frustrating the process to begin, in our view, is fertile ground for violence. And you see, the sad thing is that the person who's very guilty of violence is the government and the king. So there are those who are saying, in a situation where all forms of peaceful expression are closed, people have got to rise and defend themselves. And there are those who are saying that the strength of the strangle on the people by the king is through the army and the police. They have engaged in a process where they feel that the police must be the target of attack. We think that a situation where violence is the order of the day is not acceptable. But we understand that in a situation where government is provocative on peaceful, defenseless, and innocent people, the consequence will obviously be that people are going to decide on how to engage with the state. We are concerned about that. One. Number two, we're also concerned about the fact that government continues to target, arrest, and harass leaders of the pro-democracy groupings in Swaziland, including the fact, as you mentioned, that they have recently listed Eswatini Dlamini as a terrorist person in Swaziland, using the laws that target terrorism. We think that this situation is not acceptable. We are calling upon the government to ensure that an environment of peace is created, and the onus is obviously on the Kenyan government to ensure that a climate of peace conducive to dialogue is created. We have been calling for this since October last year, before President Ramaphosa came to meet the king. And we were happy that the king committed to a peaceful process that will lead to a national platform of engagement. They has delayed that process deliberately, in our view.
Lastly, talk to me about the socio-economic conditions on the ground, because I imagine that it's all very well to talk politics and transition and dialogue, etc., regional intervention and involvement of the region. It's quite another to have the pressure cooker of the objective socio-economic conditions on the ground, which do actually most of the time feed into how the situation plays itself out, at least politically.
Absolutely, Simelane. We have not come out from the effects of COVID-19 as we all know it. But we are a country where poverty is very extreme. We are speaking of a society where some 70% of the people who live in the countryside live below the poverty line. We're talking about a situation where the youth, which are the big number of our people, are unemployed. We're talking about a situation where the education sector has been allowed to collapse by the government. We're talking about a country where the health sector, if one walks into a government hospital right now, there are no drugs, no medication. You know, the personnel there is under stress because people come there for help, they can't be assisted. We're talking about an economy that has collapsed. We are talking today of a situation, as we all know, that the war in Russia and Ukraine has escalated. You know, the price is of gas, of oil, of paraffin. We're talking about a situation where the food crisis is hitting hard on the people. We are also facing a government that does not seem to care about how the people can be assisted. We're talking about a government that's failed to provide basic services to its people. That's why, you know, we cannot separate the call for democracy from the situation where people are living in poverty, which in our view is caused by the failure of the government to take care of the people and their needs.
All right, I've got to thank you. Let's leave it there. We'll continue to watch the situation as that SADC Troika meeting is convened in the coming weeks. That is Thulani Maseko, who is a human rights lawyer in Eswatini, talking to us from Gamanzini in Eswatini.